Monster Hunter Rise has a lot of work to do. It follows in the footsteps of World, a game that sold more copies than any of Capcom's other titles. But it also has to juggle its design with the limitations of the Switch, its reduced processing power for one, and the need to play well on consoles as well as in handheld. But somehow Capcom have done it. They've created a game which runs perfectly, full of masterful maps and monsters, with new features that are so good it's like they've been in the franchise for years. The Palamute mount, the wire bug, and the Rampage Mode. However, some features in Rise streamline the Monster Hunter experience, with a focus on fun and less on challenge. But does this pursuit of accessibility lose what makes the franchise great? In order to explain all of this, the good and the bad, I'm going to discuss everything in detail. Story, monsters, new abilities, maps, Rampage Mode, and accessibility. So let's begin, shall we? I'm Twinsticks, and this is my review of Monster Hunter Rise. The story of Rise is this. The village of Chimera is under threat from the Rampage, a huge pack of monsters in a giant stampede. Magnum Arlo is the big baddie here, who feeds off the frenzied monsters in the Rampage. And yep, as you've probably guessed, it's your job to take him down. Aside from the simplistic plot, I really enjoyed the story. It's a more intimate tale than World, focusing on the people of Chimera and your connection to them. They're basically like family, as you've grown up in the village alongside these people. There's Hojo the Guildmaster, a small rotund man who's exceptionally wise. There's Elder Fugan, who's stoic and jovial and has a laugh which is so over the top it's verging on manic. And Hanoa and Minoto, twins who have a telepathic link with the Rampage. I even like the super positive chef Yomogi, whose pre-meal song is so infectious it literally haunts me in my sleep. Because of this bond between characters, I always look forward to logging in just to speak to these people, in the same way I would with my residents in Animal Crossing. There are two criticisms I have with the story though. One is a big deal and the other is, well, just plain odd. The first issue is that the story doesn't end. You defeat the final boss and a cutscene plays, showing a party at Chimera Village. It seems like the perfect point to finish the game, as we've defeated the final boss and Chimera is safe. Except you leave the party and see Hanoa and Minoto using their powers down by the lake. We end on a cliffhanger and there's nothing after this point, which is as it sounds. Rise isn't complete on launch. A massive update is coming at the end of April, probably by the time this review is out, but it should have been available on day one. I wanted a reason to keep playing, but instead I have to criticise a game which I loved my time with. It's a real shame. The other issue is the structure of the story, because after you defeat Magnum Arlo, the credits roll, but then more content is introduced, including cutscenes and 2 new bosses. I really don't get this. I can only assume Capcom were worried about overwhelming us with a 50-hour story, so they had Magnum Arlo as the main villain and put him at the 20-hour mark. I know World had this structure where new main monsters were introduced late in the game, but Rise marketed Magnum Arlo as the main villain. Defeating him when we weren't even that powerful was underwhelming, which was worse for me as I faced him in a hub quest before the story. Yeah, it kinda made the story lose its impact. But you know, none of this really matters as soon as you start fighting monsters. The story is solid, but really we're here to smash things over the head with a giant hammer. Well, I have to say, the monsters in Rise are outstanding, and I'd even go as far to say they are better than anything we saw in World. And I think the reason for this is the Japanese themes the monsters are based on, with some monsters based on Japanese folklore or historic periods of Japan. If we look at Magnum Arlo, his appearance is similar to traditional Japanese armour. He also emits a purple gas inspired by Hitodama, balls of fire said to harvest the souls of fallen soldiers. I think this is genius, as the fantasy themes created by the folklore have allowed each monster to be designed as creatively as possible, and the fact their movesets are inspired by the theme makes sure that each fight feels uniquely different from the next. Like when fighting Gos Harag compared to Magnum Arlo, his moveset is completely different. Gos Harag is inspired by the Namahage demon, which you can clearly see on his face. But in Rise, Capcom have added a frost element, so his moveset uses ice beams and weapons created from blocks of ice. Actually, he's probably the most monster-looking monster in Rise, due to his demon-like face. When we compare this to the dinosaur themes in World, it feels like the creative doors have been blown right open. I only see this after playing Rise, but most of the monsters in World were either reptiles or dragons, whereas here we have rabbits, turtles, spiders, bears, monkeys, as well as actual monsters based on Japanese folklore. As I just said, each fight is unique because of this variety, but we also have to recognise the role that Rise's new abilities play. The wire bug caught me most off guard, as it fundamentally changes how we interact with each encounter. As we now have a grapple, we can cover greater distances with ease. We can move around an arena quicker, and as a result we can dodge more easily. This means that monsters have more complex attacks, simply because we're more equipped to deal with them, rather than being limited by the movement of our dodge roll. Generally, there's more projectile and lunging attacks, like Gos Harag's sweeping ice beam. As soon as one of these moves activates, we're forced to react and use the wire bug to handle the situation. This usually means we'll zip to safety or launch ourselves forward for an aerial attack. It's hard to describe just how good this feels, but I'd say it's on par with the Divine Dragon fight from Sekiro, as riding gusts of winds was liberating as we glide through the air. Well, that's basically what Monster Hunter Rise is, except rather than be an isolated moment over 10 minutes, it's the entire game. On a deeper level, it's the little things about the wire bug that surprise me the most, the way we can use it to stop monsters escaping, or how it streamlines the whole healing process. I always found it frustrating when a monster would run away. Then you'd have to spend 5 minutes catching up just to land a few hits and win the fight. Now though, if we're quick we can launch towards the monster and land those hits to secure victory. The way we used to heal now also seems outdated, where we'd stop fighting, run to a safe spot, use a potion and then run back. Now the wire bug lets us get back on our feet as soon as we get knocked down. We zip to safety, instantly use a potion and zip back. All of these features add a new sense of mastery to combat, perfecting when we use the wire bug to dodge, or how it can be used to get back into battle. But aside from our movement, it also requires relearning weapons we'd previously mastered, and this is down to the new Silkbind moves. I tried a few of these out, and they're all a lot of fun. They're so over the top, often launching into the air for an aerial attack. My favourite was the hammer due to this reason. Its attack is so strong that it literally smashes the earth on impact. There's also a lot of strategy here, as this move uses up 2 wire bugs. So this means every time we use one, we have to assess the risk of using up our wire bug meter. If we mistime it by a fraction of a second, we could be left vulnerable as we can't zip away to safety. It's honestly crazy the amount of depth these moves add, in their timing, their variety, and how they use up the wire bug meter. And this is on top of weapons that are already extremely complex, taking tens if not hundreds of hours to master. There is another controversial feature of the wire bug though, a feature that focuses a lot less on mastery and more on fun. At first, I was a bit nonplussed with this new mechanic, as it's clunky to control. The light and heavy attacks take a while to execute, and trying to move a monster into the perfect position is a feat in itself. But after a while, I started to see monster riding in a new light. I realised that there is some mastery here, although to a much lesser degree. As everything is on a timer, we have around 30 seconds to do as much damage as possible. We might focus on quicker light attacks to get more hits in, or prefer heavy attacks that take longer but do more damage. We can also press Y to launch the monster into walls and even into another monster, which in turn lets them be mounted. So you can see there is some mastery here, but it's nowhere near the requirements of each weapon or learning a monster's moveset. And you know, I do think it's a cheap way of doing big damage, especially with our mounted Punisher. But you know what? You can't deny it's a lot of fun, in the same way it's fun watching something like Godzilla vs. Kong. Neither are trying to redefine a genre, they're simply presenting us with a spectacle as huge monsters battle it out. Capcom have even made parts of the map destructible to create over-the-top action here. So yeah, I like this feature. It's fun and it requires enough mastery to make it rewarding. The Palamute companions are another new feature that impressed me the most, as they go above and beyond mounts in other games. If we look at mounts in other games, why do we use them? We use them to get from point A to point B, and that's really it. Sometimes there's a boost mechanic to make movement more interesting, and some games let us increase our mount stats. But other than that, there's rarely anything else. So we interact with our mounts like this. We jump on board, travel to our quest marker, jump off, and the mount disappears. While in Rise, our Palamute joins us in combat, often biting down on a monster until they're flung off, has customization in armour with some amazing looking sets, and also has a ton of cool features outside of combat completely. For example, our Palamute will jump if we press the right trigger, up ledges or to quickly climb vines. And there's even a Mario Kart style drift mechanic to give us an insane burst of speed. Yahoo! But more strategically, while riding our Palamute we can use any item, like the grindstone to sharpen our weapon in between encounters. This is such a small detail, but like the wire bug, it streamlines the Monster Hunter experience. No longer do we have to stand still to sharpen our weapons, we can do it on the move. But the absolute icing on the cake is the fact we can dismount our Palamutes, launching ourselves into the air to land a heavy attack on a monster. I think all of these features take Palamutes to the next level, but this right here, this little move was so much fun, I was logging back in just to experience it. There's nothing I would change. It is actually perfect, and I can't imagine playing Monster Hunter without them. Fun fact actually, when I went back into World to record footage for this review, the first thing I did was press up on the D-pad to whistle my Palamute. But of course this feature wasn't available, so nothing happened. But the fact I did that instinctively just shows how much of an impact they've already had. Having to find vines to climb up levels was annoying, and chasing after a monster on foot felt especially drawn out. I guess it didn't help that the maps in World were much narrower than we have in Rise, as I was lost in tight interweaving corridors. But this isn't a problem in Rise, as the maps have been designed to be more open, often with wide open plains that give us space to breathe. These areas felt like Capcom were always setting the stage for an epic battle, but on a higher level it makes encounters less frustrating. As we're not battling in tight spaces, we're not wrestling with the camera with our back against the wall. The wire bug is a big part of this, as we can move more easily during combat, but they've also allowed the maps to be designed more vertically, sometimes extending 5 tiers into the sky. These maps would be frustrating in World, but in Rise they're not, as we can easily jump between levels using our new abilities. And if we wanted to cover an even greater distance, we can hop on a dual line and use a great wire bug. This is an ingenious take on a fast travel system, by the way. I mean, this is how you fast travel in other games,
But I'll find out. What? Yep.
and this is how you fast travel in Monster Hunter Rise. This is all designed, of course, as we no longer have scout flies to lead the way. Now all we have is a monster shown on the map, and it's up to us to make our way to them. I think this is better than World, but there are a few issues with it too. The good side is that without scout flies, we have to learn the layout of each map, which ties into the mastery mechanics found elsewhere in the game. We're also getting into the action quicker, rather than finding a monster's trail and relying on our scout flies to lead us there. But the bad side is, the maps are still easy to get lost on. They're the same size as World, so they take a long time to learn. It's also not clear what level a monster is on, whether they're at the top of the map or right at the bottom. This means you'll sometimes head to a monster to find out it's actually below you, or above you. The monster icon is slightly greyed out if you're on the wrong level, but it's still hard to tell. And this may be because of my nostalgia goggles, but I miss tracking monsters. In World, it felt like we were studying our prey, gradually learning more about each monster and how to beat them. Defeating a monster in World felt like a combination of intelligence as well as skill. But as Rise is more action orientated, it's more about brute force. However, I do enjoy the maps a lot more, even if they do look generic on the surface. They're basically stereotypical video game zones: jungle, forest, snow, desert, lava. But of course, when we dig deeper, they are so much more than this. They're a joy to explore and full of interesting things to see. The flooded forest has tropical vegetation and mysterious Aztec temples. Sandy Plains has scorching deserts and Tomb Raider tombs. Frost Islands has woolly mammoths and maroon ships trapped in the ice. Shrine Ruins has dilapidated buildings and ancient temples. And Lava Caverns has a huge volcano erupting in the distance. If this wasn't already enough, the maps are split into sections, creating even more variety. We could start a fight in a flooded cave before finishing in a swamp, or fight near buildings before finishing next to a huge waterfall. And I mean, look how good they look. Look at this on Lava Caverns, the bright red lava against the bright blue water, plus the reflections in the water too. And Chimera Village was stunning, popping with colour in different areas. The Buddy Plaza in particular blew me away, with vibrant greens and a wide open lake in the background. I don't even mind the lower resolution that comes with the Switch. Sure, there's a lot of jagged edges and certain textures look appalling on the big screen, but I think it adds to the charm. Rise may not be a graphical powerhouse, but it makes up for this due to the incredible art direction. Aside from the visuals, these maps are everything we could ever want from an open world. Or semi-open world in this case. One of the best things about open worlds is the reward for exploration. The visual reward of something cool, or a unique item that boosts our character. well Rise has all of this in spades. There's all of the items used to craft armour, potions, ammo, etc. But we also have collectible rewards too. There's 10 relic notes on each map that give snippets of information about the area, plus endemic life, a feature which has been expanded from World. Discovering all of these creatures for the first time and taking a photo with our in-game camera felt a lot like I was playing Pokemon Snap. And filling up my notebook after each new discovery felt like I was completing my Pokédex. There are even animals hiding in tall grass too. Each map also has a super rare endemic life, which only appears at certain times and certain locations. The first time I saw one of these, I stopped everything to head over and take a picture. I cannot believe I was this excited for finding a fox in a game where we hunt giant monsters. I have no idea how Capcom did this, or even why, but I'm not kidding when I say it was one of my favourite parts of the entire game. Okay, so there's a big part of Rise that I've not spoken about, and that's the new Rampage. The Rampage mode is based off the Zora Magdaros levels from World, where we use mounted weapons to defend our base from attack. I personally did not enjoy these levels, as they were slow paced and took me away from hunting monsters. So when I heard this mode was coming back for Rise, it's safe to say I was a little worried. Well, I shouldn't have been worried because the Rampage mode is great. Unlike World, it has a lot of strategy. We have a limited amount of defences we can place on the battlefield, which forces us to think about where to place them. Do we place our most powerful weapons on the front line, or do we put them at the back for one last stand near our main gate? Once placed, there's also strategy, as each installation has different attack patterns. The machine gun turret has a siltbind shot that reels a monster in, which we can follow up with the cluster shot, whereas the ballistae has a retreat shot that pushes a monster back, and a crag shot which can knock monsters down if you land headshots. This is so much better than World, where we're simply loading cannonballs into a cannon. Seriously, who thought this was a good idea? As we progress through a rampage, the intensity gradually increases, our stronghold levels up, unlocking more powerful weapons, and more powerful monsters are thrown at us. This culminates with the Apex monster right at the end. The Apex monster is massive, and wipes out half of our defences as soon as they spawn. I think Capcom wants us to charge into battle here, but as the Apex monsters are so powerful, I found it easier to chip away at their health using a turret. It's also a good idea to be near the splitting wyvern shot, which was so over the top, dealing 6,000 damage and lighting up the battlefield with a mushroom cloud, like a mini nuke from Fallout. This is all great, isn't it? Everything I've just described shows how well thought out the Rampage mode is, so why don't I like it? Well, it's not that I don't like it, it's just that it's never as good as Rise's core gameplay. This was the case in World, but it's even more true in Rise, as we have wirebugs and Palamutes, which are so much more fun than simply sitting on a turret and firing at a monster from a distance. I do, however, appreciate how this mode adds variety to the game, as it's a nice change of pace from hunting monsters all the time. And the fact we're not forced into this mode over and over is a plus. I think we only have 4 Rampage missions throughout the story, and the rest of the time they're optional. It does make me question why we choose Rampage missions over hunts though. Why would we take ourselves away from the best parts of the game? Well, one reason is because Rampage missions are a great way to get monster parts, sometimes as much as 19 parts at a time. And this is really why people are calling Rise the most accessible monster hunter yet. It's not because its systems are more accessible, its systems are as complex as ever, with an overwhelming amount of pre-meal options, 5 different talisman melding pots, recruiting buddies, crafting jewels, the Meowcenaries, the Argosy shop, sending buddies out in submarines, a daily lottery, and a large pool of skills. Rise isn't accessible in this sense, so the only reason we're calling Rise more accessible is because it's a much easier game than previous Monster Hunters. The monster parts are the first reason why Rise is easier. We get a lot from Rampage missions, but we also find more on hunts. I was always finding random parts on the ground, and parts fall off easily when we ride monsters. But just as we have more parts, armour also takes less to craft. At the moment I think the balance is just about right, as I only had to defeat the same monster 3 times for a high level weapon. Any more than this and it was starting to feel grindy, although I realise everyone's tolerance for grinding is different, so you might think this is too easy. In other areas of Rise, I'd agree with you, as monster hunts are too easy. For example, I never failed a quest during the story, whereas in World I remember failing even towards the end of the game. The challenge in World made every fight tense, as I'd only win by the skin of my teeth, but in Rise everything is less tense, as it's easier to boost our stats essentially for free. Admittedly, the stat boosts are on a timer, so we can't be fully stacked for the entire fight, but if things were getting tricky, I'd just leave the area, boost my stats and then return with the upper hand. And other times, I just use the stink mink to lure a monster back with me, setting it up to be mounted. I do appreciate how we're rewarded for our efforts here, as we have to learn where the stat boosts are on each map, and there is a certain skill in luring a monster without getting caught. But there are other features that make the combat too easy. One Dango, for example, weakens monsters 90% of the time, and another gives you an extra life 60% of the time. For these Dango, there's no effort, as we simply click a button and the game is easier. I know this is like adjusting the difficulty slider, as everything is optional, but in loot-based games, I need an incentive to play on harder difficulties. There should be a reward for not using these boosts, or a penalty if we do. There's a more detailed conversation to have around the difficulty in Rise, as it's subjective from one person to the next. And although I've only scratched the surface here, I do want the game to be slightly more challenging. When the endgame is released and we have more powerful monsters, this could change. But it will be interesting to see how Capcom handle difficulty here. I just hope the next Monster Hunter isn't even more accessible, as I worry we'd lose what makes these games special: mastering our weapon, our loadout, and a monster's attack pattern. As this is personal taste, it's hard to find any objective faults in a game that's been made this well. Capcom have showcased a masterclass in game design by adding new features developed to the highest standard. We don't just have mounts, we have mounts with interesting movement mechanics and incredible customization. We don't just have a grapple, we have wire bugs and silkbind moves that make each weapon feel new again. We don't just have new monsters, we have some of the best designed bosses I've ever seen, and we have maps that are visually stunning and filled with interesting things to see. Experiencing all of this in one game is astounding, and I cannot believe Capcom have done it. And arguably, we've lost some of World's Edge in the pursuit of accessibility. But when you're having this much fun, none of that even matters.